Hey everyone, welcome to another typology interview. We have Alex and Colby here from Physiotype. That's how you say it?
Yes.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. Well, welcome, and thank you very much for reaching out. So I just want to maybe get your background in typology before you started Physiotype.
Yeah.
Colby, you want to start first?
Sure. So I think me and Alex both had fairly different backgrounds to Physiotype, and then we kind of met up about 5-6 years ago. It's been a while now. I was always skeptical. I kind of like all of my friends were into MBTI, of course, and I was fairly skeptical about it. Just because, you know, it sounds like kind of like astrology or something like that, and you get these communities that kind of, you get these feedback loops going and people all agree on the wrong things. And it felt a little weird to me. But when I started looking more into it, I felt like there was a kernel of truth there. Me and Alex found each other. We kind of talked about our ideas about Physiotype and, well, what would later become Physiotype, but why MBTI is good, why it's bad, what's missing from it. Yeah, and then Physiotype just grew very naturally from there. But Alex, what do you,
Cool.
you started off a little different than me in typology.
A good friend of mine had actually recommended that I read Please Understand Me Too from David Kiersey. So I started there, and I did the kind of stereotypical thing where, like, I made everyone I know take the test, and from there I learned about the cognitive functions online, and kind of the typical rabbit hole I think people fall into when they first learn about personality types and MBTI. After a while, I mean, after I met Colby, definitely, but over time, like I guess I saw like how MBTI, the flaws in MBTI, I guess you could say, and how, you know, MBTI as a system's been around for so long, yet no one in the scientific community acknowledges it really. There must be a reason for that. And so that, I think that was the real motivation for me. Between that and me and Colby had before that really been noticing how people who typed similarly seemed to have similar appearance to each other. And so between those two things, it kind of led to me and Colby trying to work out something on the side. It wasn't quite Physiotype at the moment, at that time, but from there, I think we got to where we are now.
Cool. Awesome. Really cool. I first want to apologize. I didn't know that it was going to be both of you, so I only have your name in the title, but I'll change that as soon as I publish the video.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Sorry about that.
No, I'm apologizing to you for it. Okay, so really cool. So you guys had this skeptical outlook of MBTI. You were seeing the issues with it. How did you guys connect? How did you guys meet?
It's through a mutual friend and an Instagram group chat, I believe. Yeah. And then we got talking to MBTI and we became friends through that. And then we just kept talking. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't make out that entire question.
Oh, I was just wondering how you guys met.
I was telling him about the group that we met on a group chat and we started talking about MBTI.
You guys just keep on going. I can barely hear Benjamin right now, so I'll let you know once I can hear him. I don't want to ruin the whole show, but we'll just keep on trying.
With my mic?
But
I put the mic up.
You sound fine now. No, it seemed like an internet connection problem, but it seems fine now. So let's just keep on going. You were sounding like a robot, basically, you know.
Oh wow, yeah, that's probably my connection or something. I don't know.
All good now, seems.
Yep. Okay, so then Physiotype, the philosophy behind that was just typing people based on pictures, on videos, or matching them to their cognitive type. How did you get started?
Right. So I guess really it just started with, oh, these two people look alike. Oh, they act similar, you know, and just kind of like that. So it wasn't nothing like super official at the start, but over time, you know, we realized people. Well, first it started with people that we realized were testing similarly to each other. It grew from that, but it really did just start us noticing, oh, these people test similarly. Oh, they also look similarly. That's interesting. And then we tried to extrapolate from that.
Right.
Yeah. So we basically found that people who were typing similar looked similar. And then we tried to figure out, okay, why is this? What exact features is it? And then eventually we got to the point where we can type people just from a picture or a video.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And what about like Okay, so they're typing similar. How do you know they were properly typed? Like, how did you get rid of that noise?
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's why it took so long for us to start even making a website or anything, just because there is a lot of noise and there's a lot of trial and error in it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now we're kind of at the point where usually when we type someone, it's different than what they would have tested as if they took like the 16 personalities test. Or
Really good. Yeah.
I think that's the common one right now.
Right.
But where was I going with that? But we have gotten to the point where we're more confident in our typing than what the people test as as a self-assessment on a website. And that's just over time. We were looking at specific features, and we tried to track those features to behaviors. So
Right.
we were trying to track to the behavior rather than the self-assessment itself.
Yeah.
And
it
of
would be
course,
very difficult.
go ahead,
I
Colby.
was just going to jump in and say it would be very difficult to type people and have that be consistent with the way that they're actually typing themselves on self-assessments. Like, it's
Exactly.
odd, right? You type as a certain type, and let's say you're doing like the last column P and J. I mean, that's how the tests I've taken look like. And you're either going to be P or J. It doesn't tell you like how close you came to J. If you just took the test in a different day, all of a sudden you're typing J instead of P. Every single one of your functions change, and
That's
that
right.
doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense because you just answered one question differently. Every single one of your functions. That's not the way it works, obviously. And so
Yeah.
that's why we disagree with the self-assessments, really.
Okay. So in the end, when you get your type back, does it look like the traditional 16 types, or is there something different?
We're working on different nomenclature because we do believe that our system is different enough from MBTI that it could be confusing to someone who's just coming straight from MBTI.
That's right.
Kind of similar to like how socionics is pretty different from MBTI, but people still get confused because of similar nomenclature.
And we generally just used 8 types instead of 16, right?
Right. We dropped the I and the E. Not necessarily because we don't believe in like extroversion or introversion, but rather because we've become pretty skeptical of how being introverted or extroverted relates to the function stack and how strongly you use individual functions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay,
INFPs are supposed to have FI as a dominant function. ENFPs are supposed to have NE as a dominant function, and vice versa. And we've seen INFPs who have stronger NE and ENFPs who have stronger FI. So we just don't think INE actually swaps the functions the way that.
Right. A bigger example would be, for example, I know at least one ENFJ who has pretty strong SE, for example, and that doesn't make sense in the traditional MBTI paradigm of, what is it? FE, NI, SE, TI. Like it should be FE, NI as the first two. But if someone's using SE as much as they're using NI almost, then it gets messy quickly. And because of that, we think, at least for now, while we're doing testing and whatnot, it's better to just drop the I and the E and just try to say, oh, he's an ENFJ with heavy SE, for example, or he's an ENFP with heavy TE, as opposed to trying to fit it into a strict 4-function stack.
Right. Okay. I was wondering if you have done some sort of intercomparison with other practitioners, to sort of judge if they're typing people correctly or not, or like if it lines up with your system. And I'm wondering where your system might line up more with, if you've seen other practitioners in MBTI or in socionics or things like this.
So I haven't reached out to practitioners in person, to communicate with them. But like I said, when I was doing MBTI, when I first got into this, I really went down the rabbit hole and I really watched a lot of YouTube videos with a lot of practitioners. And going back now and seeing how those practitioners typed people and us trying to type them separately, like there's enough there for there to be maybe a pattern, but it's definitely not enough for us to agree with their assessment the majority of the time.
Right. So have you seen some of my interviews and some of the people that have come along there? Has that kind of lined up, or it's also not quite matching?
So actually, and you
You're into objective personality. That's your jam, right? Objective personality.
Well, those are the people that I'm interviewing. Yeah.
Okay. We've go ahead, Colby.
We found, just coincidentally, I read the objective personality website, looked at them a little bit. I'm not like 100% sold yet, but they seem like interesting, good people. And we are surprised how often our typings match theirs.
Wow.
It's not 100% at all, but if we type someone, that's 1 in 8. We call it 1 in 8, because we drop the E and I. So you'd expect other practitioners to just type people the same as us, 1 in every 8 times on average. But seems like with objective personality, it's a lot more than that. So I think, objective personality stumbled on something similar to we did. It's not 100% the same, but it is an interesting amount of agreement that I'm finding.
Yeah, I remember I looked at the website and I haven't read everything on the website. It's been a lot of skimming. I do have a day job, so I only have so much time to devote to this. But I remember seeing a column of pictures of people they had typed as STPs and agreeing with all of the people in those pictures, which I had never seen before, ever. So that in itself was impressive. I've watched a couple of their YouTube videos, and they have a lot to say about the theory of how individual functions interact with each other. I'm not completely sold on that stuff yet, but at the very least, they seem to be typing much closer than random chance to what we type people.
Yeah. So that's something interesting with objective personality, is that they did a typing game and they created docs of people with their faces. And then slowly but surely, they started seeing similarities in the way they look after the typing. And so it's interesting that they came to that from a different direction than you guys did, but you guys are sort of meeting in a place.
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. It's something that I need to read on more for sure. Because again, I haven't finished looking at the website.
So you guys offer typing services and classes.
We have a Patreon for people who want to support us, but we're not doing this as a business venture, at least not right now. What we're really trying to do is just find a way to make this system falsifiable, testable, so that we can actually run some real tests, and hopefully, if we're right, get this into the scientific community. Have a version of the cognitive function system that actually works and can actually be used in studies and be replicatable.
Mm-hmm. Our main goal is just to publish a paper. I think that would be a very good first step. Do some experiments with self-assessments, combine that with us typing people. We predicted what they would self-type as 90% of the time. That's statistically significant. It would be a test that we would write, but we would guess what they are ahead of time, and they would end up, proving us right. And you could do a study out of that, and that's our main goal. But there's a lot of parts we have to get set before we actually publish a paper.
Right.
Yeah. Not to mention just going back to the issues of self-assessment and how tough it is to get someone to answer consistently more than once. Which is why we're really, and I don't know how much you've had a chance to look into our stuff. I know most of it's in audio form right now, so it's hard to skim. But we're really trying to look for why functions behave the way they do. Why do people with specific functions the way they do? Because we hope that if we can figure that out, we can come up with an assessment that accurately tests for the functions, as opposed to just testing for specific behaviors that we think might be related to a function sometimes, Yeah,
really good. Okay, so you have a blog and you have a website that I linked, and then there's a Instagram that I linked down below.
Right. And we've been doing most of our what would you call it? Most of our explaining in detail, but not a lot of brainstorming as well has been on the podcast.
Okay. So you'll send me a link to that afterwards. I'll put it also in the description.
Sure. Yeah.
So on the website, physiotype.com, we have basic descriptions of our dichotomies: local, universal, meta, mesa. prone supine. And then we have like a few blog posts with research articles, but it's fairly scant information. If you like, I would say go to physiotype.com to figure out what we're about. And then our blog is going to kind of flesh everything out and be a little less formal.
So you kind of touched on it. That was going to be one of my next questions is, so once you've typed somebody a certain type, would you go back and investigate their cognitive functions to make sure that you were doing the right thing, like getting them typed right?
Yes. And in fact, I mean, we do this constantly. And if we didn't, we'd still be like, we were going through a phase where we were typing everyone as NFJs, for example, and we'd still be there. And that was like, probably 3-4 years ago now. But we are constantly trying to double check our work and trying to,
and funny, everyone types themselves as an NFJ anyways.
yeah, it's true.
And we'll go back, we'll change our minds occasionally. It's not great for publicity, but sometimes we do. Sometimes we get it wrong. No, especially like with, STP, NFJ, like we'll get that wrong sometimes because it's what we call an isomorph. They share all the same functions. And because Physiotype believes that all functions are kind of on a scale, we kind of think STPs and NFJs are in a way similar. It's just that NFJs have certain functions heavier than, STPs. And then, so you can get it wrong because of those shared functions that people have. And then talking to someone helps afterwards. Yeah,
that's really honorable that you would go back and correct yourselves like that and not stick to your guns and plow forward. And it's like, it has integrity and it shows promise for your system. Like you're putting the system before your own egos, which is important. Yeah.
Yeah. Colby said this before on the podcast, but like if we came about some, irrefutable proof that Physiotype just doesn't work at all, like I think both of us would be willing to drop it without feeling too terribly bad about it.
Wow.
Fortunately, it seems to be working so far, so I'm not too worried about that. But
that's really good too.
Yeah, I think the kernel is there. Like there's abundant scientific evidence in papers published that reveal that craniofacial features do relate to measurable behavior. They trained a neural network on thousands of people, and it was able to predict their big five results with surprising consistency. Nowhere near perfect, but like the correlations were quite significant. So like it's well known, or it should be well known, that physical features do relate to behavior. So that's 100% true, and we're just trying to kind of figure out how that works as best as possible.
And try to see if it works within the 8 cognitive function model as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is just like a little bit of an aside, but traditionally there's a Kabbalistic tradition. It's called Torat HaPartzufim. It's like the wisdom of the face. And it's also about reading people's personality and predicting the future based on their facial features. And it's like a really ancient thing that they don't teach people because they can become gurus or pretend to be gurus if you know it. So they try to keep it as hidden and secret as possible. But it exists. It's really interesting.
Well, they're going to be angry at you for saying this on YouTube.
Yeah, well, it's kind of known that it exists, but it's not known how it works and what it does. So it's interesting that you guys are sort of like, it's something that kind of is consistent throughout time as well.
I mean, multiple cultures have done this. Chinese culture has had its attempts at face reading, and I think that speaks to the fact that humans we intuitively try to read people. I think on average we're not very good at it. I think there's some things we predict better than others. Just naturally right off the bat, but people have been trying to do it for thousands of years. Maybe there's something to it.
Yeah, really cool. Can we get a little bit into like the technical aspects of what a face looks like and how you would read someone's face? What are you looking at? The eyes, the nose, everything?
Should we? We should go through Benjamin's face.
We should.
You got a nice
my
face.
resolution big enough?
We looked at you kind of like beforehand. So first off, we do agree with the assessment that you're STP, right? That's
right.
ESTP?
ISTP, yeah.
Okay, ISTP. Okay. So first off, you're prone. What that means is the outer edges of your eyebrows are higher than average people like the outer, your eyebrows are more like this than like this, essentially. Like really the apex of your eyebrows are significantly higher than average people.
Right. So Alex is a little bit like mine, and then you're not, Colby?
No, I'm an NTP. So I'm technically more prone than Alex, but I don't look very prone. I'm fairly soft.
Okay.
So it's not like I'm not a great example of that face.
And
but
so what does that indicate, those eyebrows?
It would be analogous to T.
Yeah. And if you look closely, we believe that you can spot TI from the pronation of the eyebrow. I feel like TE eyebrows are prone, but they flare up more. Trying to stay in the camera. They flare up more. TI eyebrows more often do come down on the edges, right over here. So, they go up here, come down there. TE, generally on average, this is a soft point for us, but they kind of go up more like that.
Okay.
That's caricature, but you get it.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. I'll let Alex.
And so then the eyebrows going down makes it more feeling then?
Right. So eyebrows like this, and also the shape of the eyes. This also applies to the shape of the eyes. So, eyebrows and eyes that go down like this are what we call supine, or would be F. So like in your eyes too, I believe it's hard to tell in the camera, but it looks like you've got pretty prone eyes as well.
I think his eye sockets are quite prone as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about the apex of the eyebrow in relation to the inner eyebrow. And then it's about the outside of the eye socket to the inside of the eye socket and the relation between those 2 points, basically.
Yeah, so like they kind of go up a little bit. Right. Yeah.
Right.
And so then Colby's ears are going down then, and then
my eyebrows come down on the edge a lot. Like you're looking at my face, I'm
looking at your eyes. So your eyes, I guess they're kind of more straight.
You're
ruining our entire theory right now, Benjamin. I'm an NTP.
Okay.
No, my eyebrows come up a bit. I would say my eyebrows come up a bit, a little more than like an SFJ, but not a whole lot.
Okay.
And then if you look at Alex's eyebrows, they're very flat.
Right.
So, like, my eyebrows don't go up a lot, but they do have like shape like this. And Alex are quite flat, and so that's indicative of FI.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Not just F either, FI.
Okay. And
the more shape there is to the eyebrow, the more likely it is that there'll be FETI.
Or TIFE. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that axis as well. Okay. Yeah, that was my follow-up question. If you're looking at if it shows a main function. Okay, cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
And so then what else is there?
So it's hard with you because you have a beard, but we look at the line where the chin meets the rest of the face, I guess you could say.
Okay.
As a general metric for meta versus meso functions, which we define meta functions as functions that are more, what's the word?
Referential,
more property driven, and meso functions as functions that are more holistic in nature, more
intrinsic
as well. So any SI, FETI are all meta functions, and then SENI, FITE are meso functions.
Okay.
So the higher the line is or the closer that line is to your lower lip, the more likely it is that you have only meta functions.
So like the alpha quadra versus the gamma quadra sort of thing.
Right. And socionics, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
like the
if
alphas
you're
are the INTPs, the NTPs,
and the SFJ. Yeah.
And then the gamma is the opposite of that. Yeah.
Right. So then the lower that line is, the more likely it is that they're gammas. Right. And then if the line's in the middle, it's less indicative of anything, but it's more likely that it's the other two quadrants.
Yeah, really cool. I really like that you guys invented your own language to talk about this, because I guess you have to.
Yeah, you kind of have to.
Yeah,
we tried for so long.
It's different enough from MBTI that we kind of had to. And, it's similar to MBTI, but it is different so much that if someone types as a certain type, we're happy to say, okay, in MBTI, you type as this. Sure. But in Physiotype, we're going to type you as a local universal meta or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Just because there are differences, and if people type as something in MBTI, that's meaningful, sure, but it doesn't match up necessarily perfectly with ours every single time.
Right, really right. Cool. So like a common example of a difference you might see would be like maybe a girl types as ESFJ, for example, right? And we come and we type her as STP. A a lot of times the issue is with the T and the F. And we believe that this is because cognitive functions aren't as strict in an order as MBTI would suggest.
Right. And like,
but we believe that this girl is using SE first, but we believe that her FE is high enough that she's testing as an F type on MBTI. When really,
and this,
go ahead, Colby.
Sorry, I have terrible timing. You're learning. So in this specific example, it does work especially well because like women on average, according to Big Five, are more conscientious and less agreeable. So if you're more agreeable, you're more likely to type as F, whether you're an STP or not, right? And if you're more conscientious, you're more likely to type as J, whether you're a J or not.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. So like from the objective personality standpoint, just to bring comparison, because this is also what my audience is more used to as well. They do allow for jumpers. So instead of the 16 types, they have the 32 types, whereas your auxiliary function doesn't necessarily have to go the opposite of your dominant function in attitude.
Okay.
So like what you were talking about would be an OP and is SEFE. So it's actually an ESTP jumper because they jump to the FE. That's how they call it.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, they took basically the opposite route as us.
Right.
They said,
And so
there's less functions. This is evidence. They said, there's more functions. This is evidence. That's funny.
Right.
That's interesting.
But it's the same sort of thing because you're saying FE is stronger than the FI. It's like an SEFE is what you just said for this girl.
Right. That's interesting.
Right.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and is there something with cheekbones or with nose or?
Yeah, so for you, if we were typing you, one thing we'd look at is the bizygomatic width. That's this widest part with your cheekbones.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we look at is width to height ratio of head. So this to this. FETI has larger width to height ratio. I think that holds with you.
Right.
Definitely holds with me. And Alex is a good example of a bit longer of a face too. So, you'll just see people with their faces look longer or wider. This guy's got a fat head. He's got a long head. That's FETI mostly, right, Alex?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know why, because my bias has always been just to ignore this aspect of typing. Like, look, when I'm typing, I'm not looking at the physical thing because we're looking at cognitive functions, which aren't physical, right? But like, I'm trying to remember what Dave and Shan from OP are. So they said the EJs have bigger heads usually, like lion heads. I don't know what that means. Have you seen things like that as well?
I mean, and at the very least, NTJs typically have wider faces than SFPs, for example. And I don't know if that holds us true for STJs for whatever reason, but I have seen something there. I don't.
Right.
Since we're not using E and I to say EJs type more like this, it's harder for me to say because I haven't really been paying attention to that. But we definitely see patterns with the we call it bizygomatic width because that's what they use in the research papers that we've been reading. That's the term they use. But yeah, it's basically like that, the width from here to here. And
so do you just eyeball that or you measure it?
Right now we're eyeballing. Right now we don't have numbers down. We need more people. We need more people that are willing to let us put a measuring tape to their face.
Well, if you have them on a camera, you could just measure pixels because it's the ratio that you care about, not the actual absolute size, right?
That's true.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. As long as they're facing the camera perfectly straight, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot we could do with just a two-dimensional image of the face. I think most of the typing probably we can do that way.
This would be a good time to mention the Chicago database, Colby. I know you did more than me.
So that's like one of our bigger projects. So Chicago Face Database, they have 600 faces, really high quality pictures, like 5 pictures of each person. And what we did was we just went through and we typed all 600 people.
Wow.
And this was just based on like looking at their face, for like a good, 5, 10, 20, 30, 45 seconds, based on, it's not just intuition. We're like confirming their facial characteristics. But we are using our gut a little bit, right? Like we're like, oh, they look like an STP. And so we typed in as STP. And then what I did was I did a statistical analysis. So they measured everyone's faces in the Chicago Face Database. They had 50 different metrics of measurement. So like width to height ratio, eye inset, eye outset, eyebrow height, eyebrow length, all that stuff, right? And so I did a statistical analysis on every single one of those parameters for every single face. And the effect size was huge. So basically what that means is we found that people of the same type have very similar facial features. So it is objectively true that we type people by objective measurements, basically. Like you look at all the NFJs and all of them, you know, their noses are like significantly wider than the non-NFJs, or STP's faces are significantly wider on average than everyone else. So,
that is actually like a little bit of circular logic, because you are typing them based on how they look, and then you say, okay, they look based on how they were typed. It's kind of
So all this proves. Go ahead.
So what we were looking for with this was just to prove that we were being consistent. Yeah. And not only self-consistent, but mutually consistent. Make sure that, like, I'm not typing NFJs the way he's typing NFPs, for example. So I don't know if we already said this, but these people didn't take any kind of assessment. We didn't talk to these people at all. So we have no idea how this data will relate to them psychologically. But
so
we don't want to go we don't want to put any more work into this until we know that at least we're being internally consistent, you know?
Right. So your testing was that both of you independently could get the same type as well, and that you're able to objectively perceive their faces and organize their faces.
Right. And in a way that's measurable too. So it's not just that we just agree. It was also that there was, what's the word? There were actual properties that we were looking at. You know, there was actual measurements. There was actual statistical analysis to confirm that
we're very consistent on. We're very consistent on objective facial features. That's meaningful, but that doesn't mean that we can. It doesn't mean everything, right? It's just one factor.
Yeah, it's testing your perception, basically. It's showing that your perception is somewhat accurate.
So at least we're consistent.
Yeah.
Awesome. And that's kind of how we come at everything, right? Like, we're not gonna, unless we have some data to support what we're saying, we're gonna be soft on that point. And so now I'm hard on the point. We are very consistent with our typing based on objective facial metrics, but I'm not gonna say that we're 100% accurate inferring psychological behavior, because we haven't done that test yet. When we do, then we'll see.
Awesome. Do you get people like sending you pictures, can you type this person? Can you type this person? You get that a lot?
Yeah. Especially more now that we're going public with this. Like I said, we kind of kept this to ourselves and like our friend group for, we went public, like 6 months ago? So I guess almost 5 years, more than 5 years of just keeping it to ourselves, which is a good thing, because if not, we would have come out saying everyone was NFJ, which would have been bad.
It's good that you at least have like, what are those? There's like that whole video game fiasco around No Man's Sky or something like that, where like they came out with it too early. So it's like the same sort of thing. It's like, you don't want to release your product before it's ready.
Right. Yeah. And there's definitely still like like we said, we're consistently like re-questioning things. I was just, in fact, I want to post a blog. I want to make a blog post about this, because there was a post I had put on the subreddit, because before we did like the blog or anything, we were just on a subreddit where we had typed a girl as SFP. Someone was asking questions about it in the comment, which made me go dig up the actual photo, because it was just like half a picture and compared to another half picture. So I went and pulled up like the original photo and looked at her now, because the picture was taken in like the 90s or something. Anyways, and turns out we wouldn't type her the same now. We type her as STP now. So, you know, we're constantly trying to improve. That photo, we had typed her as SFP like 2 years ago. It was bad by me to post a picture without double checking. But yeah, no, we are nowhere near complete in our goal here, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
Okay, so we have a good question here. What's the anomaly factors? I assume mutation through evolution would not always strictly be adhering to personality and cognition. So what are the facial anomalies that you are likely to see?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I think he's talking about the way that some people might have facial anomalies that don't fit into standard traditional faces. So someone that you couldn't type or something like that. I don't know, like just as an example, eyebrows. So this person doesn't have eyebrows or something like that.
Yeah. So basically, I guess you want to look at it at a statistical level.
Right.
So all environmental factors that contribute to non-environmental things, they're genetics, right? And so there are some genes that cause behavioral changes that also might make it more likely that you're going to have a certain facial features. That doesn't make it 100%. It just makes it more likely. Right. So if we have 1,000 people, we're going to have like really consistent, good looking data. But one person, absolutely, they could have anomalies. They could genuinely be cognitively an STP, but they might on their face be a SFP. Like that's possible. Right. But it's on a statistical level on averages that we're saying STPs do on average have X more whatever than an SFP.
Okay. So like that's also in your claim. So you're not claiming to be able to catch every single person, but you're talking about a statistical majority. Is that's what you're catching?
Yeah, it wouldn't really make any sense. Like I think it's silly to say that their functions are like 100% tied to a facial feature. Like I can imagine for some reason, there's different genes contribute to the same facial features probably. That seems likely. So the gene that contributes to TE and facial height or something, that might be confounded by another gene. So it's possible, yeah.
Okay, so it looks like he's satisfied. Okay. Good answer, by the way.
Yay.
All right, awesome, guys. Is there anything else you want to talk about that we sort of glanced over?
I know we explained
we didn't really talk about our dichotomies. We didn't talk about physiotype much, but that's a whole rabbit hole. Local, universal, meta, mesa, pronosupine.
I don't know how much time you have on your hands, Benjamin.
Well, we can talk about it. Yeah. So what are these? You have types that you named, like physiotypes.
Yeah. So no, actually. So basically, we have three dichotomies, and basically, if you take those three dichotomies, you can come up with 8 different types, right?
Right.
So one of the dichotomies I'll start with is local versus universal. So basically, there's local, universal, meta, mesa, pronosupine. Every type is either local or universal, either pronosupine, either meta or mesa. So for local universal, I'll explain that real quick. People who are universal and the concept of universality is kind of like it's about abstraction and principles, and you're more interested in things that apply to lots of little things. So instead of talking about how my day was, I'm going to talk about, I had my day, and then that made me think of this concept that applies to my day and to all my other days. And I start talking about like politics or economics or something. Mm-hmm. But a local person is more interested in things that actually happen in the real world rather than concepts and abstractions.
Right. So that would be sort of similar to sensing versus intuition.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how it relates. Yep.
Right. And
then
so this, sorry to cut you off, Colby.
Nope, I'm done.
And so I think this is kind of a good example of what we've been trying to do with the functions in general, where like, at least in my anecdotal experience with MBTI, a lot of it's, sensors are like this. Sensors like that. Sensors are very handy. Sensors are better at cooking. But we're really trying to tackle the why. Why are sensors, why are locals better at cooking? Why are they more likely to have anecdotes in their conversations instead of just general principles? And so when we defined universal and local, we tried to make it as simple of a definition as possible without sacrificing answering the why as to why these behaviors are more likely for S types.
One of the things that MBTI did, I think, a little bit wrong is when they defined sensing versus intuition, they made more value on intuition. And so people would always want to be intuitives because it's more valuable. It seems like it's a better pick.
Right. And I think part of that, I think that's part of the reason why, at least in my experience, a lot of sensors mistype as N's.
Right.
Or I really should be saying a lot of locals mistype as N's on MBTI.
That's right.
But yeah, sorry. Keep going, Colby. I didn't mean to cut you off for so long.
No, that was my definition of local universal. That's actually like a very old concept. We didn't invent local universal, really. Like in lots of different frameworks and disciplines, that concept exists. You know, in meta logic, it's called like the type token, or not the type token distinction. It's called the use mention distinction. And in, like even in programming, you kind of have universal and local concepts, classes versus objects versus, you know, functions. So it's a very like old concept that has existed for thousands of years, really.
Right.
But that's just one of three, and I don't want to waste all of your time. So do you want to give him another one, Alex?
Definitely. Yeah. So that's one of three. What's the second one then? Mesa versus meta?
That's Mesa versus meta. Yeah.
This one's harder.
This one's harder, and this is definitely by far the biggest work in progress that we have.
So you mentioned it earlier that there are Mesa functions and meta functions. Is this different or it's similar?
It's same thing. So you'll have the meta, the meta social functions, and then I forgot the term we came up with the other two. Colby, help me out.
You came up with this: social versus
conceptual functions.
Conceptual,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Okay, so you have meta social functions, which are FETI, and then you have meta conceptual functions, which are NE and SI.
Okay.
You have mesa social functions, which are FITE, and then mesa conceptual functions, which are NISE. So meta functions, maybe it's a little easier to start with the social functions. So meta social functions are more likely to, I'll start from the ground up. Like FE is stereotypical for like reading the room, understanding how a person feels. How does the group feel about this thing? Also, FE has this stereotype of like, their opinions might change on things depending on what the group dynamic is. This stuff like that. But why? Why is FE like that? And why is FI different than that? So our justification for the why is that meta social functions are more interested in the properties of a social dynamic than mesa social functions are. So FE is more interested in the properties of the group, the properties of the community, the properties of their church group, the properties of their family.
So they're concerned with how everything relates to each other. They look at all these little things. They look at the community members, they look at the family members, the party members, and they're thinking about how all these things relate. And that's why FEs on average probably, you know, are more into hosting parties than FI people, because they're about these group dynamics, and dynamics it's about relations between multiple things. So it's kind of like a referential.
So would you say like they're more into looking at like the little subtle nuances in the social domain? Or they're looking at
among groups.
Okay, or they're looking at the
among
structure.
Groups.
Okay.
So like an FE person wouldn't be more likely to be interested in a person that an individual person they're talking to, or like the person's personality or whatever. But they would be more interested in how different people get along.
And FI, in contrast, is a mesa social function that instead of looking at the properties of the group, it will view the group as the group. It will view the individual as the individual. And this, both of these have benefits and drawbacks.
Right.
I think one of the benefits of seeing a group as, a set of different properties is, well, you're more likely to see differences in each of those properties. You're not going to group everyone into the same clump. FI, one of its downsides can be at times it might see everyone in a group as either saints or, the opposite of saints. FE is less likely to do that. But a drawback to seeing all the properties of a group and how you relate to that group and how the group relates to each other, it becomes harder to define those things as real. So we have this issue. We've come to the conclusion that FI is more likely to view identity as real, intrinsic to an individual, not just an individual, also a group, intrinsic to that group. That's why it has a hard time viewing someone in a different light when it's already decided something.
Mhm.
And FE can have almost the opposite problem, where they might consistently view a group based on the pieces and might not view the group as a single entity, which can have its benefits and its drawbacks. And so basically the definitions I just gave for meta versus mesa there, if you can extrapolate that to all the functions, that's basically how we're defining these mesa versus meta functions, the alpha versus gamma quadrant, like
And
you put
Alex,
it in socionics.
Alex's description refers to the entire general concept of meta versus mesa too. Like even just not even saying which meta functions we're talking about and which mesa functions we're talking about. Meta is always about quantization and properties and breaking things down into their constituent parts. Meta says Colby is a certain number of protons, neutrons, and electrons, and the four forces, and that's what makes me me. And they kind of have like this materialist view of the world where everything is a sum of its parts. But a mesa is more likely to say, no, Colby is Colby. He's got these intrinsic qualities. He's this real person. He has emergent qualities. He's not just a sum of his parts. He's something special and different, like, and has his own intrinsic value, kind of. And that's
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the high level definition of the meta mesa thing too.
Mm-hmm. And so, like drawing that to like the conceptual function, so NESI versus NISE, you'll find that probably 90% of famous authors, especially authors that have large worlds that they build, layer upon layer upon layer of, they'll be NISE. And we believe it's because to be able to world build the way you do, you have to be able to treat those entities you're building as real, as intrinsic parts of those worlds. If every time I, as an NE user, have to write about a character and I have to think, oh, okay, he's funny, he's smart, he's kind, so he'd say this. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't do that in real life, but just to exemplify the point.
Mhm.
An NI user can just be like, Tom is Tom, and just write what Tom would say. So
Right.
It's easier for a mesa conceptual user to keep track of large amounts of information at a time because this is the thing.
It's kind packaged into a single entity rather than viewed as like 100 different properties that are all exploded.
Right.
Right.
The properties that create the entity rather than the uniqueness of the entity itself.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. So like we could bring the analogy to lots of things. So we can bring the analogy to cars, for example, and look at, okay, what makes a car? And then that would be more like the meta thing. Whereas the mesa is like, oh no, there's no difference between like the Rolls Royce. It's a completely different entity than, I don't know, the Ferrari. So they're not both. Yeah.
Did you listen to our podcast or
no,
we've used the exact same analogy many times. Okay. Yeah. So we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Right.
I think about how many car mechanics out there. My dad's into cars and he's STP. So, I'm a little biased here. But think how many like STP car mechanics out there that you would bring a souped up BMW that you put custom paint on, and they'd be like, "What have you done? You've ruined the integrity of the BMW. This is not a BMW anymore." This is something this is a phrase or a line of reasoning that a mesa user is more likely to feel or believe than a meta user.
So then that way the mesa, I guess, would be more specialistic. Like you would only bring a certain type of car to their repair shop because they know this car. Whereas like the meta, he might not be able to repair that car as well, but he'll be able to repair all the cars sort of at a good enough standard.
I had at a conceptual level 100%. Like, I'm not sure that's actually true in real life, but as part of like the analogy and the feeling of mesa versus meta, 100%. Yeah, that's exactly right. Right, Alex?
I will say that anecdotally, anyways, 100% of German car mechanics have been NI heavy STPs. So I've never thought of that line of reasoning before, but I think you might be right.
and yeah, I think you're right. Like mesas would be more specialist because they're like, okay, the BMW, I know the BMW. And the meta mechanic is more like, it has an engine, it has an internal combustion engine, it's got brakes, it's got headlight. I don't know. I'm into cars, so I don't have many words to throw around.
Yeah.
But exactly what you're saying, like metas metas can often be more adaptable because everything is made up of similar parts, while mesas, the thing is just the thing.
Mhm.
How right is Lewis here? Sounds like the mesa is more tied to their organization of their world. They're more tied to it, connected to their organization.
Mesa is more tied.
I think if Louise is saying that the difference between meta and mesa is how they organize the world in their head, then I would mostly agree with that. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's what he's saying.
Okay, yeah. So how would a meta versus a mesa organize the world in their head then? Or
So,
that's what we were talking about, I guess.
Yeah, what a meta likes to do is they like to have a lot of properties, and then when they see a new thing, they go, "What existing properties that I know of
Right.
are comprised to make this thing?" But a mesa will just see this new thing and be like, "This is a new thing. This is interesting and unique and has intrinsic value, and I'm going to learn about the thing." But a meta is like, "Oh, well, I know everything's made up of the same parts, so I'm just going to use my knowledge that way."
Right.
Yeah.
I have a lot of background in like the ecology field, and the ecology field, there's a lot of SFPs from my experience, and you will see this a lot, especially with the way how they categorize plants and animals in their heads. This is a sunchoke sunflower. This is a Eiffel Tower sunflower. This is a different kind of sunflower. Each one has its own identity. Each one has its own thing, its own intrinsic value, its own emergent qualities. This is something that you wouldn't expect to see, for example, from an NTP in the ecology field. While yes, of course, he or she would be able to identify the different types of sunflower, they wouldn't put much value in the different types. They would be much more likely to see their properties, see that they share most properties in common, and be satisfied with just calling them sunflowers.
Right. Yep.
And once again, meta-mesa is also an age-old, 1,000-year-old concept too. Like never known by the specific name, but if you're into reading philosophy or looking at like just different domains, you'll see that the meta-mesa dichotomy existed before we created it. Once again, I'll bring up meta logic. They call it the use-mention distinction, and that roughly relates to meta as well. You're either mentioning something, so you're talking about something, or you're actually using an object. So it's kind of like referential versus intrinsic, I guess.
So it must have taken you guys like a lot of time to get to link this concept though to what you guys are doing and to link it to those axes as well.
Yeah, at least I wasn't even aware of the concepts existing outside of the realm of personality types until we started seeing patterns. And
the concepts came from personality types. So like personality types contain and can be described by meta, mesa, and universal local. But I think those concepts are also a good way to describe the entire world and every domain in the world too. They're very universal concepts in general.
Cool. Okay, so what's the last dichotomy then?
Alex?
Prone supine. This is probably the easiest to relate back to MBTI because it really does relate pretty well to what most people see as T and what most people see as F. We lose the simple definition for prone versus supine is really almost exactly the same as the definition Big Five has for disagreeable versus agreeable. So the more prone you are, the more disagreeable you are, the more supine you are, the more agreeable you are. We believe that this affects social structures a lot. I don't think it's because a prone person is intrinsically more likely to be higher up on a social ladder, but rather because being disagreeable is a necessity to be pretty high on a social ladder. So while we believe that supine types are more likely to be supine, we do believe in subtypes, as we were talking about before. And we do believe that some supine types, like NFPs, might be more TE heavy than really supine NTJ, for example. So this does affect social structure, but it's not like NTJs are more likely to be up on the top of a social ladder just because they're NTJ and nothing else. We believe that for someone to be really high on a social ladder, it's because of more things than just being agreeable, disagreeable.
Right. So,
But you would never find someone socially high up if that was very supine. I would say, I'll bet my money on that.
Really?
Yeah.
Just because they're very agreeable. You have to. Yeah. It's hard to get to a high rank in any competitive endeavor, and supine people don't really do that. They have their own strengths and their own weaknesses, and prone people have their own strengths and weaknesses. But yeah.
Imagine you're competing for a job in a tech firm or something, and the guy next to you is willing to stab you in the back, but you're not willing to stab him back. Who's going to end up on top? Yeah. I don't think it's a bad thing to be supine, but I do think that it puts them at a disadvantage in competitive fields.
Something that you notice as well in like a lot of literature and movies and things is that the villains are usually the one who is the most willing to go there.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The head of the villain organization, and all of his minions are the ones that just would never go there. That's why they're minions.
Exactly. Yeah. And on the other side of the head, prone people will generally have more difficulty with cooperation.
Right.
And that's a problem in itself. So it's all, we're all equal. We all have our own strengths and weaknesses, kind of,
Right. Really cool, guys. Awesome. So check out your podcast and your website and everything. You'll give me the links for the podcast.
Yes.
Or I guess you can find it by the website as well.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I'll give you all the links.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming out and sharing like your baby with the world, even though you say you're not too attached to it. But I mean, still, 5 years is not a small amount of time. So
it's true. No, thank you for having us. It's nice to talk to other people out there that are as interested in cognitive function theories as we are.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Cool. All right, so have a good one, everybody.
All right, thanks.
Bye.